James Carter was no stranger to discipline. A retired Army sergeant with 15 years of service, he'd faced his share of challenges, from deployments in Iraq to navigating life as a black man in a small Ohio town. At 42, he carried himself with quiet confidence, the kind earned through years of proving himself in tough situations. That morning, he was driving home from his job as a logistics coordinator, his pickup truck loaded with groceries for the week. It was a routine day, or so he thought. The flashing lights in his rear-view mirror came out of nowhere. James pulled over, hands already on the steering wheel, a habit he developed after too many stories of traffic stops gone wrong. The officer, a young man with a tense jaw, approached and asked for his license and registration. James complied, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. "Is there a problem, officer?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Your taillight's out," the officer said, barely looking at him. "Step out of the vehicle." James frowned. A broken taillight? He'd just had his truck serviced. But he followed the order, stepping onto the gravel shoulder of the quiet road. Before he could ask anything else, a second cruiser pulled up, and another officer joined the first. Their body language shifted. Hands on holsters, eyes narrowed. "Sir, we need you to turn around and place your hands behind your back," the second officer said. "What's going on?" James asked, his pulse quickening. "This is about a taillight?" The first officer didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed James's arm, spinning him around. "You're under arrest," he said, snapping handcuffs onto James's wrists. The metal bit into his skin, and confusion gave way to a sinking feeling. Arrest for what? James demanded, his military training keeping his voice steady despite the rising panic. "Armed robbery, assault, and fleeing a warrant," the second officer said, reading from a tablet. "You're James Carter, right?" "Yes, but I haven't done any of that," James said, his tone urgent but controlled. "Check my record. I'm a veteran. I work at a warehouse. I've never been arrested in my life." The officers exchanged a glance, but they didn't respond. They patted him down, emptied his pockets, and shoved him into the back of the cruiser. James's mind raced. Armed robbery? A warrant? He'd never even had a speeding ticket. As the car sped toward the precinct, he replayed every interaction he'd had recently, searching for some clue, some reason why this was happening. Nothing made sense. At the precinct, James was led into a holding room, still handcuffed. The officers took his wallet, phone, and keys, laying them out on a table like evidence. One of them, a sergeant with a graying mustache, flipped through James's ID. "James Carter, huh? You got some nerve acting innocent," he said, shaking his head. "We got you on camera hitting that gas station last week." "I wasn't at any gas station," James said, his voice rising slightly. "I work nights. I can give you my supervisor's number, my time cards, everything. You got the wrong guy." The sergeant snorted. "That's what they all say." He walked out, leaving James alone in the room, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. James sat there, his hands still cupped behind him, trying to piece together how his day had spiraled into this nightmare. He thought of his daughter, Mia, waiting at home. She was 14, and he'd promised to help her with her history project tonight. He needed to get out of here. But how? Meanwhile, across town, a different kind of chaos was unfolding. At the local FBI field office, Agent Maria Delgado was pacing in front of her desk, her phone pressed to her ear. "What do you mean he's not answering?" she snapped. "He's supposed to check in every hour. Where's his last known location?" The voice on the other end, a junior agent, sounded nervous. "Ma'am, his tracker pinged at a police precinct about 20 minutes ago. We're not sure why he's there, but—" "Get a team together," Maria interrupted. "We're going in. Now." The man they were looking for wasn't just any agent. He was one of their best, a deep-cover operative who'd been embedded in a local crime ring for months. His real name was classified, but his cover identity? James Carter. The coincidence was a disaster waiting to happen, and it already had. Back at the precinct, James was still trying to reason with the officers. A new one had come in, a detective named Harris, who seemed more interested in paperwork than listening. "Look," James said, leaning forward as much as the cuffs allowed. "I'm telling you, I'm not who you think I am. I served in the Army. I've got a clean record, and I've got people who can vouch for me. Can you at least run my prints?" Harris barely looked up from his computer. "We're running them now, but the system's slow. And your ID matches the suspect description. Black male, 6 feet 1 inch, 190 pounds. Name James Carter. You're not doing yourself any favors by arguing." James clenched his jaw. He'd faced prejudice before, but this was different. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a full-blown case of mistaken identity, and no one seemed interested in hearing him out. He thought of his military service, the medals he'd earned, the lives he'd saved. None of it seemed to matter in this room. Then, the door to the holding room burst open. 3 men and a woman in dark suits stormed in, their badges gleaming under the lights. The woman, clearly in charge, held up a hand. "FBI, where's our man?" Detective Harris stood, startled. "Were you looking for?" "James Carter," the woman said, her voice sharp. "He's one of ours. You've got him in custody, and we need him released. Now." James's head snapped up. "FBI? One of theirs?" He opened his mouth to speak, but the sergeant from earlier cut in. "Hold on," he said, pointing at James. "This guy's a suspect in a string of robberies. We're not just letting him walk." The woman, Agent Delgado, stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "You've got the wrong man. Our James Carter is an agent working a classified operation. This man," she glanced at James, her expression softening slightly, "is not him. Run his prints. Check his background. You'll see." The sergeant hesitated, then nodded to Harris, who typed something into computer. The room was tense, the air thick with confusion. James sat silently, his mind reeling. He was an FBI agent, but the fact that someone else with his name had just saved him from whatever this mix-up was about to become. The computer beeped, and Harris's face paled. Sir," he said to the sergeant, "his prints don't match the suspect. He's clean, no record, just like he said. Army veteran, honorable discharge, no priors." Agent Delgado exhaled, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Release him," she said, "and we need to talk about how this happened." The sergeant uncuffed James, mumbling an apology that sounded more like a grunt. James rubbed his wrists, his mind still catching up. "So, what's going on?" he asked, looking at Delgado. "Who's this other James Carter?" Delgado sighed, glancing at her team. "I can't tell you much, but I can say this. There's another man using your name as a cover. He's one of our agents, and he's been working undercover to take down a criminal organization. Your ID got flagged because it matches his alias. We're sorry for the mix-up." James shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. "Sorry? I was face down on the ground, accused of robbery, because of your guy's alias." Delgado's jaw tightened. "We're going to make this right. But right now, we need to find our agent. He's off the grid, and if he's been compromised, this could be bigger than any of us." Over the next hour, James sat in a different room, this time with a cup of coffee, and his belongings returned. The FBI agents were in and out, coordinating with the police to figure out how the mix-up happened. Apparently, the other James Carter, the agent, had been using a fake ID that was too close to James's real one. The system had flagged James's license during a routine check, and the officers, eager to make an arrest, hadn't bothered to dig deeper. Delgado came back to check on him. "We're still sorting this out," she said, "but you're free to go. We'll need you to sign some paperwork agreeing not to discuss this, for your safety and ours." James nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about the fear in his daughter's eyes when he'd missed their history project tonight. He thought about the officers who hadn't listened, who'd assumed the worst because of his skin color and a name on a screen. "What happened to the other guy?" he asked. "Your agent." Delgado hesitated. "We're working on it. He's in deep, and this screw-up might put him at risk. But that's not your concern." James wasn't so sure. He'd spent his life serving, protecting, and now he'd been dragged into something he didn't understand. He signed the paperwork. But as he walked out of the precinct, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. In the days that followed, James tried to return to normal. He fixed a taillight on his truck, which, as he suspected, wasn't even broken. He helped Mia with her project, though he didn't tell her about the arrest. He didn't want to scare her. But the incident stayed with him, a weight he couldn't shake. He started noticing things. A car parked too long across the street, a stranger lingering at the grocery store. Was he paranoid, or was someone watching him? A week later, Delgado called. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice low. "We need to talk. Our agent's gone dark, and we think the people he was investigating might know about you. We need your help." James's heart sank. He wasn't an agent, wasn't trained for this. But he was a soldier, and soldiers didn't back down. "What do you need?" he asked. Delgado explained to the criminal organization. A group trafficking weapons across state lines might have gotten wind of the mix-up at the precinct. They could think James was the agent, putting him and his daughter in danger. The FBI wanted to set up surveillance around his house and asked him to report anything suspicious. For the next few weeks, James lived on edge. He taught Mia how to be more aware of her surroundings, framing it as general safety advice. He checked in with Delgado regularly, though she shared little about the case. Then, one night, he got a call from a block number. A man's voice, low and deliberate, said, "We know who you are, Carter. Stay out of our business." James reported it to Delgado immediately. The FBI moved fast, setting up a sting operation based on the call's origin. Within days, they'd arrested 3 men connected to the trafficking ring. The real Agent Carter resurfaced, alive but shaken, his cover intact thanks to James's silence. In the aftermath, the FBI offered James compensation for the ordeal, a sum he used to start a college fund for Mia. They also issued a formal apology from the police department, though it fell hollow. James didn't want apologies. He wanted change. He started speaking at community forums, sharing his story to highlight the dangers of profiling and rush judgments. He wasn't an activist, but he was a father, a veteran, and a man who'd been wronged. The other James Carter, the agent, reached out once. He didn't say much, just thanked James for keeping his cover intact. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "But you did." James shrugged it off. "I've got a daughter," he said. "I know what it's like to protect something bigger than yourself." Life didn't go back to normal. Not exactly. But James found a new kind of strength in the ordeal. He'd been mistaken for someone else, but in the process, he'd proven who he really was, a man who wouldn't break, no matter what came his way.